Ann Coulter has superpowers, and she showed them off on Bill Maher's show. We'll let you see the details. Plus, a Harvard professor is fired for telling the truth because we can't have that over here at Harvard. And we got to meet Fani Willis's father. And, well, it all makes sense now. I mean, the apple really doesn't fall too far from the tree. I'm Larry O'Connor, and it's time for Larry. Happy President's Day. And let's all just take a moment and pray that someday soon we'll actually have one of those things, one of those presidents of the United States. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? Like an actual functioning commander-in-chief and somebody running the executive branch of our government someday. That's why we have President's Day, right? To hope that we get one day. That's what I thought. Yeah. Hey, we are live on Rumble. If you're watching us after the fact, as one of our YouTube subscribers watching the full show, you know you can watch us do this live every single day at noon over at Rumble. If you're checking out our podcast, thanks for listening. We're thrilled with the growth rate already on our audio-only podcast. We just launched it last week. Subscribe wherever you find your podcast, whether it's Apple or Spotify or Google Podcasts, which I think is going to be YouTube pretty soon, or whatever. Just subscribe, and if you could, rate the podcast and leave some comments, because you know how that works. That helps us across the board and everything. And thanks for watching also across the entire Town Hall Media Network. All right, let's get right to it. It's Friday night. It's Los Angeles. Bill Maher has his television show, and the panel is always kind of an interesting mix of political ideas and voices. Ann Coulter is one of the most famous voices on this show. In fact, she's pretty good friends with Bill Maher, believe it or not. That's right. Ann's very open-minded. She counts some lefties among her friends as well. And the two of them have Van Jones on the panel, and they're talking about the shooting at the end of the Kansas City Chiefs victory parade. And of course, Van Jones and Bill Maher are screaming about gun control, gun control. And then Ann Coulter points out one uncomfortable truth about the perpetrators of this crime.
I mean, we don't know who did this shooting, by the way. The Super Bowl shooting.
We have some idea.
What?
If it were a white man shooting, we'd know.
Well, we don't know. But they haven't.
That's how we know it's not a white man. I can tell you that much.
Do you think they were repressing that reporting?
They wouldn't tell us about the transgender woman that shot up the Christian school for what, like a year? San Bernardino out here. Remember the crazy terrorist Muslims? That's when I first noticed, they're not telling us who it is. It's not a white male. The longer they go without telling you, it's not a white male.
Okay, well, for this one, for right now, as of Friday night, February 16th,
we know.
We don't officially know. Okay, you have special powers.
Yeah, and actually she does have special powers. She's fantastic. Love me some Ann Coulter, but let's get to the crux of this. You saw Van Jones grinning and looking at the audience and sort of mugging it up and like, what a crazy whack job this is. You got Bill Maher, mocking her and patronizing her. Okay, you have special powers. Let's just be clear here. Toward the end of the week there was plenty of reporting that these were young minority teenagers who got into a dispute, started fighting with each other, and then a gun was drawn and shots were fired. We kept hearing from the media there and from the police, who actually made an announcement after the arrest, that these were juveniles involved in a dispute. But they wouldn't tell us the race of it, as if it's not important. But of course, as Ann Coulter points out here, whenever it's a white assailant, it is important. Why? Because there's a narrative in the media that the most dangerous criminal, the most dangerous terrorist group in America are angry white men, angry white young men. Why is it so many angry white young men are shooting up public assemblies and schools and malls and movie theaters? The plague of the angry white man, because they want to make angry white men look like some kind of terrorist. And listen, if they have statistics that show that, go ahead and bring them to the table. But what they're doing here in this case, and what they do in so many other cases, as Ann just pointed out, is that they sequester information if it doesn't fit that narrative, if it isn't the so-called angry white man who goes and shoots people. You see, if it's just a bunch of young black kids who get into a fight at a football game's victory parade and then they start shooting each other, that's apparently not newsworthy. Well, they mocked her, they made fun of her, they ridiculed her, and then literally the very next day, TMZ had video. We've got some screenshots here of it from our friend Andy No. This is footage that people were taking of themselves and their friends and each other celebrating the Kansas City Chiefs. But in the background, you can see the fight starting to break out. And as you can see, the suspects here are young black men. You can see this one right here reaching into his coat. It appears to pull out a gun. You can also see that a couple of them are wearing bandanas across their face to hide their identity. You see this one here has that too, because of the pandemic. In other words, the very next day, TMZ confirmed Ann Coulter's superpowers. Now, the reason the news media has suddenly stopped identifying the race of violent criminals, if that race happens to be African American, is because they've been bullied and intimidated into this false notion that they are perpetuating a myth that young black men are automatically supposed to be feared because they're potential violent criminals. This is about the culture in the news media and Hollywood constantly depicting and discussing and displaying young black men as angry, violent criminals. And you're just perpetuating this myth, and it feeds into systemic racism. That's what they've been told. And so they've just stopped reporting it. They've stopped reporting the news. And Van Jones shaking his head at Ann Coulter saying, this is just there. You're ridiculous. In fact, he was going right up to the line, and so was Bill Maher, saying that Ann Coulter was racist for saying an obvious truth. They were mocking her, and they were going right up to the line of calling her racist because she was conveying an obvious truth. And that is, whenever the suspect or perpetrator in a crime like this is white, they are Johnny on the spot reporting the name, the face. They put it all over the place, and then they have hours and hours of analysis about it. Oh, what are we going to do? If they sequester the news of the assailant and they don't tell you their names or their race, then you should just assume that, well, they're not white. But here's the irony. That's actually the most racist thing you can do. You see the media choosing to determine that it's not newsworthy. When the media decides that it's not newsworthy, that a violent criminal who's responsible for putting 10 children in the hospital and murdering a person in cold blood at the Kansas City Chiefs NFL victory parade, when they determine that it's not newsworthy because those suspects are black, that's actually racist, right? Think about it for a minute. Oh, geez, well, they're black, so there's no news there. What do you expect, right? That's what they're conveying by not actually reporting the news. Like, all right, we've got a shooting at the Kansas City Chiefs victory parade. We've got one dead and we've got 10 children in the hospital. Oh my God, that's a huge story. Well, what can you tell us about the suspects? Well, it's 4 young black teenagers. Oh, well, that's not news. Go ahead and report about the shooting, but keep the information about the race of the suspect sequestered. That's literally racist. And that actually perpetuates stereotypes. It's not newsworthy because it's what we expect. It's disgusting. And Ann Coulter then turned to Van Jones and said, you constantly throw these numbers out and these statistics out about how dangerous it is for black people in the inner city and various neighborhoods because of violence. But you never talk about the fact that most of it ends up being what's now referred to as black on black crime. Watch how that conversation went.
The media who do not care about blacks killing blacks. And this is the one time where I think, you always hear pretty white girl, they'll cover that. No, the blacks killing blacks will not get covered by the media. That's a huge media problem. And you'll all laugh at me, but I'm going to say it because I'm right.
Very right.
Cause of this
Far right.
is illegitimacy. All of these young men do not have fathers. And that is a huge, huge source of it. Anything that could be done to reduce the illegitimacy rate, particularly among the black community, it would be astronomical, the changes you'd see. Do you know, just one fact, if you take away the factor of illegitimacy, the difference in the black and the white crime rate disappears. It's an amazing fact.
It would be an amazing fact if it were true, but
well, real fast, just in case anyone doesn't know who Van Jones is, it's kind of funny for him to be sitting up there on the altar and throne of truth and lies and determining what is true. By the way, it is true. When you add that one factor in, the idea of a young black man growing up in a household with a father in an intact family versus growing up without a father in the home, the odds of the child turning to a life of violent crime or not is astronomically off the charts. That is true, Van Jones. And by the way, this is Van Jones, whose main claim to fame was being the Obama administration's climate czar, because, you know, that climate policy is always about truth and no political agenda or propaganda, right? And then it was discovered he had to lose his job because he had signed a petition about the 9/11 truth campaign. He was a 9/11 truther. He thought that the World Trade Center terror attacks was an inside job. So here's Van Jones rendering a verdict of truth and lies on someone like Ann Coulter. But we'll let him finish here because I'm sure he has something very important to say.
Well, I mean, it is a big part of it.
Listen, I've got two very small children. I've got my eye on this problem a lot. You know, I'm trying to raise, you know, Black kids here in Los Angeles. I'm not a part of the pro-crime lobby.
Yeah, well, and that's good. I'm glad that he put it that way because in his party, there is a pro-crime lobby. They're the people who want to put criminals back out on the streets. But the question to Van Jones is, you are raising two children right now. Do you think that your two children that you're raising as a responsible father in the home, do you think they have the same odds as turning into a gang member or a drug dealer or a violent criminal on the streets as a child who is growing up in the same city of Los Angeles without a father in the home? Do you think you make no difference in those child's life? You think that there's absolutely, you have the exact same odds your kids could turn to a life of crime? Who knows? Well, I mean, if they go into politics or the media, I guess they will have turned to a life of crime. But you get the point. And when you look at that table right there, and you've got Ann Coulter saying, listen, you're going to laugh at me, you're going to yell at me, you're going to call me names, but I'm going to say it because it's true. Illegitimacy is the major factor here that's causing this violent crime, and especially black on black crime. You've got Ann Coulter saying that, saying we need to fix that and we'll save lives. And you've got Van Jones just shrugging it off and laughing and saying that it's a lie. Which one of those two people really care about the black lives that are being lost in these cities? Who of those two people really do believe that black lives matter? Like, not as a political slogan, but actually as an idea of compassion. All right, a little bit more here because she's just so good. The debate then turned to guns, of course.
And why there is such a big disparity between what people say they want and what the law is in a state like this.
Well, the disparity has a special name called the NRA. That's the source of it. There is an organized gun lobby that's not about the gun owners. Gun owners, frankly, agree with some of those numbers. It's the gun manufacturers that are the number one source of the money into the NRA, and people are still scared to take these votes. As bad as
Didn't the NRA just go bankrupt?
Yes.
Well, now, that's what I'm saying. And now,
It's not the NRA.
I guarantee you'll see a difference going forward.
Yeah, this is just lazy punditry. This is punditry from 15 years ago. Well, they're all afraid of the NRA, and thank God Bill Maher is like, wait, what are you talking about? The NRA? They literally are a non-entity at this point. They literally have no money. They're not running any ads anymore anywhere. There's no lobbying effort from the NRA. By the way, it's because people like Van Jones and his pals and George Soros-backed groups that are anti-gun, they sued the NRA for being political activists. It's outrageous. It's disgusting. It's outside of the bounds of the First Amendment. And by the way, instead of just sitting here whining about it, it's frankly something that conservatives should start doing. We should start suing. You know, when a child is forced into a transgender transition against the parent's knowledge and against the parent's will, and that child is now, you know, sterile and wants to sue the hospitals, we should also sue the Human Rights Campaign, the advocacy. They're the NRA of transgender procedures. You put those people out of business. They put our conservative groups out of business. We put them out of business. But back to this point, the NRA has nothing to do with this. They just use that. That's just lazy Van Jones 15 years ago punditry. The NRA literally isn't doing anything. The fact of the matter is gun laws aren't passed. Gun restriction laws aren't passed. Laws infringing people's Second Amendment rights aren't passed for two reasons. The first is they are challenged in court and they end up getting overturned because of the Second Amendment in the Constitution. These gun grabbers, the only way they can do what they really want to do is to repeal the Second Amendment and confiscate every gun. That's the only way. And they do want to do that. If you scratch the surface of a gun grabber, you'll hear them say, you know, for instance, ask them like, okay, tell me where in the world, what country has the policies that you think would be the correct policy that you would want to duplicate here? And they'll almost always say, I'm sure you've heard them say, we should look at what Australia did. Look at, and no reporter ever follows up on that. They always say, I've Hillary said it, Biden has said it, Obama said it. There's, well, we should really look carefully at what Australia did. And no reporter follows up and said, well, sir or ma'am, Australia literally went door to door and confiscated everybody's gun. And now it's illegal to own a gun. So when you say we should look at what Australia did, what you're saying is you want to repeal the Second Amendment. That's the only thing they can do. So there's two reasons why these gun laws never go anywhere. Number one, if they are passed in a state like California, they'll end up getting challenged in court and the courts will overturn it because of the Constitution. The second reason these laws don't go anywhere is because we, the people, don't want them. We recognize that there is violent crime out there. We recognize that guns are used for those violent crimes. It's why we want to have our guns to defend ourselves, number one. And number two, it's why we know that your laws are meaningless. Because I assure you, those juveniles in Kansas City, if we're not allowed to talk about or even discuss in any way whatsoever, because, we've got 10 people in the hospital and we've got one person killed. But, who did it, why they did it, where they got the gun, what their motives were, and why they're in the violent criminal state that they're in, that's meaningless. We don't need to care about that. We just want to confiscate the guns. Well, I guarantee you that those juveniles who just shot up 10 kids and murdered a woman would not stop and think, oh, wait a minute, I better not use this gun right now and break the law against murder, because that would be against the law with regard to gun possession. I just think that if a criminal is willing to break the law that has been on the books since before we were even a country against homicide, they're going to be okay breaking the law against gun possession. We need more gun laws, because then the criminals will really pay attention. Those people who are currently killing each other will stop killing each other because they'll be afraid of being punished for buying a gun. You've got to be a brain-dead liberal to use that kind of logic. All right. The conversation then went beyond violent crime and black-on-black crime in Kansas City and race. It then went to the border. And since Anna's so good, we just figured we'd let her have the last word here when they debated the border on the Bill Maher show. Let's go, Ann Coulter. Bring us home, baby.
It turns out there is a conspiracy to keep the border open, to flood the country with undocumented people. And it's led by Donald Trump and the Republican Party, because it's down their open border. They have the opportunity to close it. People, we've been hearing from the right that there's a political agenda here. That's why we have all these undocumented people here. Well, it turns out there is a political agenda here to not just solve the problem, but to weaponize it and use it against Democrats. And I think we have a healthy party. You could break with Biden and not get beat up on Twitter or X or whatever they call it. You could run to your own district. You can talk about these issues and get elected. The problem that you have is on the other side. If you don't march lockstep with everything that Donald Trump says, you will get destroyed by Donald Trump, which they keep nominating bad folks. But I'm very curious to hear, are you how ashamed are you that the Republican Party flipped on its own issue?
The people who should be ashamed at this table is anyone who believes that was a good border bill, or that the Democrats care about the border.
Well,
that was a good response. So I take it back. You have the governor of Texas putting up razor wire on the border. And what does Joe Biden do? He sends federal agents to cut it down. Yeah, that's a guy who wants to get tough on the border. Exactly.
Yeah, but that was a really good sneak peek into the whole purpose of this stupid bill that Republicans in the Senate were stupid enough to even sit down at the negotiating table and discuss, because it was a losing battle. And all they did was give Joe Biden and Van Jones and every other Democrat and liberal this fake talking point that sadly too many brain-dead voters and uneducated voters who don't watch this program and just watch Bill Maher will actually believe. And that is, they could have fixed it. But Donald Trump and the Republicans said no. And of course, the bill that they passed didn't have anything to do with fixing it. It actually established into law the very problem that we're still dealing with and will continue to deal with. The American people who are paying attention know better. And to It's a good answer. Good job, Ann Coulter. We actually do like Ann Coulter. Ann Coulter has run out of F's to give, and we like that about her. And she's willing to walk into that room and sit. And here's the thing: I know a lot of people who are angry at Ann Coulter right now because she's got so many mean things to say about Donald Trump. And listen, I don't agree with Ann Coulter with everything that she says. What I love about her is that she will say what's on her mind, regardless of what you feel about it, regardless of how you're going to react. She's not going to pander to you just to get a happy, warm, fuzzy reaction from you. And that means you get to see Ann Coulter walk into that room and say what she said to Bill Maher and Van Jones and the vast audience that they've got here of mostly left-wing liberals who never hear those kind of truths. But it also means that, in her opinion, when Trump is ineffective at his job, you're going to hear that from her too. And frankly, I'd rather have someone like Ann Coulter speaking her mind than somebody like Ann Coulter only speaking her mind in one direction on issues. All right, let's turn our sights back up to Harvard. Remember Harvard, the bastion of left-wing intellectualism here in the United States of America? Of course, they were in the news recently because their president, Claudine Gay, who decided to allow pro-Hamas terrorists to chant anti-Semitic statements on their campus, allowed them to thrive and continue and bully and harass Jewish students, and then said under oath, yeah, well, you know, Claudine Gay then had to be fired because they found in so many of her papers she had plagiarized and put forth false academia to try to elevate her position. Well, Harvard is back in the news, and this time thanks to Barry Weiss and the Free Press. I want you to see this video. This is of a Harvard professor and researcher who was diving deep into the data of police-involved shootings and homicides in America. In fact, he investigated police-involved violence against suspects of every flavor and kind, from, you know, shoving somebody on the street or manhandling or maybe putting them into a forceful headlock or something when they were arresting them, all the way up to a police-involved shooting. And when analyzing the data, he found something quite fascinating, not just about the data, but about the reaction of his colleagues in the academic left. Watch this.
Those experiences helped me understand what types of data to collect. We collected millions of observations on everyday use of force that wasn't lethal. We collected thousands of observations on lethal force. And the key question, I alluded to it earlier in a bit of a joke, but the key question is not just this arbitrary, silly snapshots that some journalists, not named Barry, do a lot, which is Black people are 13% of the population and they are 50% of the police shootings. I'm sorry about that, but I don't know what that has to do with the question. Right? And it was in this moment in 2016 that I realized people lose their minds when they don't like the result. Right? And so what my paper showed, you'll see tomorrow, like some of you, was that, yes, we saw some bias in the low-level uses of force, every day pushing up against cars and things like that. People seem to like that result. But we didn't find any racial bias in police shootings. Now, that was really surprising to me because I expected to see it.
I want to pause here. There's still another couple of minutes of this. It's fantastic, not just as he dives into this research paper they did and the results of the data, but also the reaction to it. This gentleman's name, by the way, is Roland Fryer. And it's important to point out that he is not a professor of African-American studies. He's not a professor of humanities. He's not a professor of criminal justice. He's not a professor of anthropology. He's or sociology for that matter. He's a professor of the economy. He's an economist. Economists are interesting cats. You know, last week we were talking about how Representative Barbara Lee out in California wants to institute a $50 an hour minimum wage. And we debated that issue with her, not directly, but with video clips of Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams, two economists, by the way, two African-American economists, just like Mr. Fryer here. Economists, even if they have a political agenda, as Mr. Fryer just admitted, he expected different results. Think about that. This is a professor who went into a research plan and studied data to write a paper expecting a certain result, which I think is a human reaction. You expect something, right? You have certain expectations. Of course you do. But economists can't argue with numbers. It's sort of in their DNA, right? It's sort of in it's who they are. If you decide to be an economist, there's got to be something in you that's like that you just have a love for the data. You have a love for the numbers. You have a love for the formulas and the results. But I think also when you go through at the level that he is as a Harvard professor of economics, you end up building onto what's already inside you, and you create this sort of firewall against political bias. And again, I mean, unless you're Paul Krugman or something, but he's not really an economist, is he? He's a polemic. And he uses the economy and just twists numbers to make people believe what he wants them to believe. This guy is sincere. He saw the numbers, he saw the results, and it surprised him. And he had to stick with the results because that's what economists are trained to do. But because it didn't settle with him, because he was expecting a different result, he decided to have another go at it. He actually tested and tried and audited his own work multiple times. Watch.
The little known fact is I had 8 full-time RAs that it took to do this over nearly a year. When I found this surprising result, I hired 8 fresh ones and redid it to make sure. They came up with the same exact answer, and I thought it was robust. And then I went to go give it, and my God, all hell broke loose.
Tell us about that. What was the?
Oh, I mean, well, your former paper published a thing, published a report about it, and it was a 104-page dense academic economics paper with a 150-page appendix. Okay, it was posted for 4 minutes. When I got my first email, this is full of.
Now, by the way, the interviewer there is Barry Weiss. This is all written in her publication, The Free Press, which does great work and great journalism. And the reference there to Barry Weiss's former paper, he's talking about the New York Times. He's talking about the New York Times. And you're hearing now the reaction. He publishes the paper. It's voluminous. It's pages and pages and pages with all these footnotes, all these archives. And within 4 minutes, he's getting, this is full of. Now watch.
Doesn't make any sense. And I wrote back, how'd you read it that fast? That's amazing. You are a genius. People lost their minds. I mean, it was like colleagues of mine were going, well, I don't believe these results. He's using regressions. I'm like, well, what the hell else we been using? I mean, we've been using them for ever. That's what you use. And I had colleagues take me to the side and say, don't publish this. You'll ruin your career. I said, what are you talking about? I said, what's wrong with it? Do you believe the first part? Yes. Do you believe the second part? Well, the issue is they just don't fit together. We like the first one, but you should publish the second one another time. I said, let me ask this. If the second part about the police shootings, this is a literal conversation. I said to them, if the second part showed bias, do you think I should publish it then? And they said, yeah, then it would make sense. And I said, I guarantee you I'll publish it. We'll see what happens.
So there's a little bit more of this, but I want you to just recognize, again, the first part is the part that shows that, yes, there seemed to be a propensity for higher levels of physical altercation between police officers and black suspects at the level of pushing, shoving, maybe even manhandling during the arrest. But when you go to shootings, when you go to the most violent type of police use of force, there is no discrepancy for black suspects and white suspects. And you've got the colleagues here saying, you shouldn't publish this. Don't publish this. You'll ruin your career. One quick thing here that I want you to think about as you reflect on that, and then you hear the next part of this. Think for a minute about all of the scientific studies from Economist to meteorologists, to climatologists, to sociologists, all of the studies and all of the funding and all of the academia focused on climate change right now. And if he is getting this kind of pressure at Harvard from his colleagues over this exhaustive study on this topic, imagine, given the billions and billions of dollars worldwide that is funneled into the climate change agenda and policies. Just imagine what kind of pressure is on people in academia with regard to making sure that only the right papers are published with the right kind of answers and right kind of solutions on that topic. And now watch what else happens to this man. Again, a professor of economics at Harvard.
So it was, you know, I lived under police protection for about 30 or 40 days. I had a 7-day-old daughter at the time. I remember going and shopping for, because, you know, when you have a newborn, you think you have enough diapers, you don't. So I was going to the grocery store to get diapers with an armed guard. It was crazy.
He needed an armed guard to go to the grocery store, and he needed 24-hour security in his home because he published a paper that defied the left's dogma. The police officers in the United States of America are murderous racists. And he needed protection. Now, again, that kind of pressure on this one guy on a paper about that topic, imagine what goes on in academia having to do with climate change or having to do with any other report or study that doesn't fit the left's agenda. This is cultural Marxism at its worst. This is the authoritarian regime that is actually threatening people's, forget about livelihoods, their lives, if they don't toe the line. There's that much at stake for the Marxists in this country. And one other point here that Barry Weiss brings up and this is like an hour and 20 minutes. The full video is worth watching. Seek it out and make sure you see it. It's fantastic. And Barry Weiss and the people at the Free Press are doing great journalism. And again, this is Roland Fryer is his name. He is the professor at Harvard who came up with this study, and he's telling his story. And here's the punchline to the whole story.
One of the details in this story is that you were suspended by a woman who I had never heard of until recently. Her name is Claudine Gay, and she said this in a letter to the economics department at the time. Professor Fryer exhibited a pattern of behavior that failed to meet the expectations of conduct within our community and was harmful to the well-being of its members. The totality of these behaviors is a clear violation of institutional norms and a betrayal of trust of the Harvard community. So I guess I want to ask, do you believe in karma?
I hear it's a mother.
And also, does calling for the genocide of Jews constitute bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
1,000%.
Yeah. So again, if the uninitiated is just jumping in and they don't get the joke, let's remind you who Claudine Gay is. Yes, Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard, who suspended that man. And you heard the reasons why, you know, which really can boil down to is he came up with a research paper that disrupts our ideological agenda. He brought facts to the table that hurt our feelings. Here's that same Claudine Gay asked a very simple question under oath in Congress.
And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
And as you see, of course, Mr. Fryer answered that question unequivocally, saying, yeah, of course it does. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if the Harvard Board of Trustees there really wants to do something and make some noise and shake things up and signal that Harvard is back in the business of education and facts, maybe they should hire Mr. Fryer as their new president. Now, on Thursday, you and I, we had a pretty fun time with the insanity down at Fulton County, Georgia. This was the hearing involving Fani Willis and her boy toy there, making hundreds of millions of dollars on the prosecution of Donald Trump. And I mean, the testimony was bonkers. It was off the rails. It was insane. It was Looney Tunes. And regardless of how the judge comes back with his decision in this case, whether he decides that there is, by the way, the bar is so low here. All the judge has to agree to is that there is an appearance of conflict between the district attorney and the appointment of the special prosecutor, and he can remove the district attorney from the case. Just the appearance of conflict. I mean, isn't it without any reasonable doubt that there is at the very least the appearance of a conflict here? I would go so far as to say there is an actual and real conflict here. But regardless of what the judge points out here and decides, the most important thing that the American people and voters have been able to see is that the entire 2024 presidential election right now is at the mercy of this insane woman, the district attorney of Fulton County, with her behavior, with her ridiculous, corrupt behavior. And she is tinkering with your choice for president by utilizing this unprecedented use of criminal justice against a presidential candidate and former president. It's never been done before. And she is obviously trying to keep Donald Trump from being, actually, I shouldn't even put it that way. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump being president. This has to do with you being able to vote for Donald Trump for president. She's violating your rights. So we saw all that on Thursday, and we had a pretty fun party with it. And we thought we'd seen it all. And then came Friday. John Floyd, the father of Fani Willis, was asked to testify under oath because, there were a couple of things there when Fani was asked, like about, why do you keep so much cash in the house? And she would just say, well, that's what my dad taught me. So they decided to cross-examine Mr. Floyd. And here are a couple of little tidbits.
After she was sworn in on January 1 of 2021. And on or about the 3rd of February, at probably 5:30 a.m. in the morning, there were people outside her house cursing and yelling and calling her the B word and the N word. And it was bizarre. Okay.
Yeah, it's bizarre. All right. You know what's also bizarre? That there's no police report about this. That there's no footage of this. For God's sake, we have footage of Jussie Smollett hanging out with the two Nigerian brothers at 2 a.m. in Chicago with the Subway sandwich. If we don't have footage of this scene, nobody on the block thought to take video of it and post it on their social media. This just happened in a vacuum here. Right? He made a similar claim a little later, and then we'll sort of give you context as to who John Floyd is and what might really be at play here.
A house that my daughter had worked for. It was a brand new house. She's the only one who would ever live there. It's a 4-bedroom, brand new house. And somebody needed to protect the house. And I stayed there to basically take care of the house, to take care of the yard, to take care of that. Also, somebody sprayed, again, the B word and the N word on the house. And I don't think my daughter even knew that. I cleaned it off and called the police, and South Fulton police. They have, I'm sure, all the records of all the things.
Yeah, we should take a look at those records. I think that would be really interesting to see. So we have vandalism there too. Boy, Atlanta is a super racist place. It's like MAGA country, right? Jussie Smollett. That's what we're seeing here. Forgive me for not believing John Floyd, but let's just take a quick walk through history to tell you who John Floyd is. John Floyd is a former member of the Black Panther political party in Los Angeles. That's where Fani was born, in Inglewood, California. He was a close associate of Angela Davis back in the late 60s, early 70s. She, of course, ended up as the first woman ranked in the FBI's top 10 most wanted. She's a terrorist. Angela Davis is, but of course, a righteous racial justice terrorist. So I guess that's okay. So of course, when he testifies, he was going to have to play that card as much as possible. Give me a break. Let me ask you something. After seeing Fani Willis on the stand last week, and after seeing video of her and her entire political career so far as a district attorney, and the show that she has made about criminal justice system and about the so-called systemic racism and Black Lives Matters and the cops are the problem and all the things that she has said, everything that she said on the stand last week. Do you think in your wildest dreams, do you think that on the night she was sworn in as district attorney, her home was surrounded by rabid, angry, hateful racists screaming profanities at her and racial slurs at her? Do you think for a second she would not have mentioned that at this point over the course of the last 2+ years? Do you think for a moment she would not have mentioned that in one of her multiple cable news and broadcast news appearances? Do you think for a second that she would not have called those cameras to her home the night that she was sworn in to give an impromptu press conference? Also, by the way, she's the district attorney in the county of Fulton in Georgia. If people were surrounding her house, disturbing the peace and screaming hateful things at her, don't you think maybe she would have prosecuted them? Don't you? And yet there's no record of any of this, any of it at all. All we have to confirm that it actually happened is the good word of her dad, John Floyd, a former member of the Black Panther Party. So I guess it's up to us then to dissect John Floyd, take a look at his character, his values, his principles, and his demeanor on the stand so we can evaluate whether he would ever lie or tell tall tales or even exaggerate something, right? Because if he's a pretty straight shooter and just gives sober, just the facts, ma'am, kind of testimony, then maybe we will believe him about the rabid, frothing, screaming, eyes bulging, racist mob attacking his daughter's home the night that she was sworn in. So let's take a look at more of John Floyd, shall we, and see how credible he might be.
I may be wrong, but I believe COVID hit in 2020. So I was asking about 2019. In 2019, did you spend any time in California?
Before COVID was even here in the United States, remember I lived in South Africa and I've traveled the world. I knew COVID was coming before. I knew COVID was around before. They may have announced it in 20, but in fact, I knew about it and I knew what was happening in 19.
The context of this question, by the way, is he was asked, did you go to California at all in 2019? And he said, no, because of COVID. And Lair's like, well, now wait a minute. We didn't really know anything about COVID until 2020, and the lockdown didn't happen until mid to late March. So, and his answer was, oh, I knew about it before everybody else. After all, I used to live in South Africa. What, does Fauci know this guy? Did they work together at all? Why wasn't this guy on the task force, by the way? If he knew about it, why didn't he say anything? I might have believed him. John Floyd, Fani Willis's father, knew about COVID before anyone else in America did. Because after all, he used to live in South Africa. I hope you're paying attention. All right, so I'll be honest, that might sort of shoot a hole into his credibility a little bit here, but I'm sure that's a one-off. I'm sure that there are other instances where John Floyd shows himself to be an incredibly trustworthy and believable witness.
You know where she moved to? No, and I didn't want to know. I intentionally did not want to know because I was not, if somebody stuck a gun to my head and I could tell them, I wasn't going to tell them anyway. I'd have made up something, but I didn't want to know.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that if you didn't want to know, you never visited her at the place that she moved to?
Oh, I never did. Never did.
I just again, I don't think there's any commentary needed here. I just want to reiterate. John Floyd claims that he did not know where his daughter ended up moving to and didn't want to know, just in case somebody came and held a gun to his head and demanded to know where his daughter lived. All right, let's move on. But wait, I can't move on. What the hell is going on in Fulton County, Georgia? What the hell is happening here? Is Fani Willis really in such grave danger? I had no idea. What is going on in this guy's head? Oh, I do love the fact I didn't want her to tell me just in case someone put a gun to my head and forced me to tell them where she lived, although I would have made up a place anyway. Well, if you would have made up a place anyway, what's wrong with knowing where your daughter lived? All right, and then there's this. The biggest question had to do with Fani Willis keeping upwards to $15,000 of cash in her home. And she said it was on the advice of her father.
When your daughter moved or left the house that she owned, did she say anything to you about having a large savings of cash?
Oh, no, no. See, maybe, excuse me, and Your Honor, I'm not trying to be racist, okay? But it's a black thing, okay? You know, I was trained, and most black folks, they hide cash or they keep cash. And I trained, you always keep some cash, because I've been places, and just because of the color of my skin, for example, I took a fellowship at Harvard when my daughter was just if I might, Your Honor, when I was just, she was just, maybe 3 years old. And I remember going to a restaurant in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I had a American Express credit card and maybe a Visa or whatever. And I had a lot of what they call traveler's checks. I don't even know if they still have traveler's checks, but traveler's checks. And there was a sign said, with the credit card, for whatever reasons, the man would not take my American Express credit card. So I pulled out my Visa card, and he wouldn't take my Visa card. So then I pulled out my traveler's checks. He said, we don't take checks. Now, these were traveler's checks. This was money. I had a $10 bill. I'll never forget this as long as I live. And he said, the bill for my wife at the time, Fani's mother, Fani, and myself was like $9.95, and I had a $10 bill. That was all that. I always remember that. But even before that, I've always kept cash, and I've told my daughter, you keep 6 months worth of cash always. For example, I had 3 safes in my house. I put some of my clients' stuff there too, things I didn't want other lawyers to be, because you're always in a firm, and I knew that there were special conditions. So some of my clients' things I would bring home, put them in the safe. But I've always kept safes. And as a matter of fact, I gave my daughter her first cash box and told her always keep some cash.
Well, that's what a heartwarming story. Never forget when I gave my daughter her first cash box so she can keep a stash of $15,000 in her home. If the real takeaway from that entire story there is that the liberals who live in Cambridge, Massachusetts are all racist, I'm buying it, actually. After everything that we've learned about Cambridge and Harvard, you know what? I tend to believe that part of it. Because what business owner wants to take somebody's American Express card or traveler's check, right? So let me get this straight. He found a racist restaurant owner in Cambridge, Massachusetts when he was going to Harvard who would only take cash from him. And so therefore, he advised his daughter to keep $15,000 in her house at all times. Because, it's one thing to say you should always carry some 20s around. Maybe 100 or 2, just in case. Some walking around money, as it were. It's a pretty big freaking leap from $10 covered my restaurant bill in Cambridge 40 years ago to keep 15 grand under the bed. By the way crime is right now in Fulton County, thanks to his daughter, the DA, I wouldn't be keeping much cash around the house. Because that house getting busted into, you know what I'm saying? All right, there's got to be something redeeming here about this man's testimony. Maybe it's this.
Did you talk about any of the testimony from yesterday or watching news reports or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. You can't cut the TV on without seeing this. The first thing, and I listen to conservative radio a lot, and last night for 5 hours, and all they talked about was this case.
So you were aware of what the testimony your daughter gave yesterday was?
Yeah, unless you don't cut the radio on, unless you don't cut the television on, unless you don't read the AJC or any other, the New York Times or whatever, which I do every day, of course.
So is it fair to say nobody instructed you that you were under the rule of sequestration?
Right, and I'm not under subpoena either.
So in other words, of course, my testimony is going to match whatever was asked and answered yesterday. Of course I was watching. But that whole thing about listening to conservative radio all day, I knew there was something about this guy I liked. Everyone has some redeeming value. Maybe he's a fan. Maybe he listens all the time. I wish wouldn't it have been great if he name dropped Town Hall? Well, of course I knew what happened at the testimony. I watched Larry over there at Rumble every day at noon. That would have been beautiful. That would have been absolutely beautiful. All right, good on you. I wonder if he's listening right now. Hey, John, how's it going? See, here's the thing. I try to be a positive guy. I try to find how I can make amends with anybody that I might disagree with. I want to reconcile as much as possible. We got to come together. So there you go. John Floyd and I can come together over his love of conservative talk radio. And now let's see with his daughter. Maybe there's something that she and I have in common.
He likes wine. I don't really like wine, to be honest with you. I like Grey Goose.
Now you're talking. I mean, I'm not going to turn down a nice bottle of wine either. But if Fani, John, and I can get together, listen to some old-time Rush Limbaugh classics, and suck down some Grey Goose martinis, I think before the night is over, we'll solve all this country's problems. Let me remind you, these are the people who have the 2024 presidential election in their hands. They're deciding who you get to vote for. They're deciding if you are allowed to vote for Donald Trump. Let that sink in. We end with a heartwarming. This is actually a very heartwarming story in a weird kind of way. It's a little meta. We're going to react to a father reacting to his daughter's viral video. And of course, the father reacting to his daughter's viral video has gone viral in its own right. You may have seen this, a TikToker, a teenager, I don't know, she's 18, I think. She's telling the story of how her father abandoned her and her family to take up a hip-hop dancing career. It's a weird story. And she claims that she had been neglected and that he never talked to her, but he did all these TV talk show appearances as a very famous hip-hop dancer. Weird, right? Let's take a look at this father's reaction to what his daughter said about him, because it's actually kind of sweet.
What's a piece of trauma that you have that's funny? It has to actually be funny. I'll go first. My dad abandoned my family when I was 5 years old. That is a wife and 4 kids. He abandoned us and then pursued amateur breakdancing.
Some more context is needed here. Needless to say, I will talk about this in a moment. All right, let's continue with the video.
And he got really good. He blew up. He became a D-list celebrity status, viral breakdancer. He became the oldest actively competing breakdancer in the world. Then he got on Good Morning America and talk shows, and Washington Post wrote about him, and he went super viral, and he did all these interviews, and he danced with Paula Abdul. And here, I'll show you.
Take a look at this 60-year-old breakdancer. Yes, 60 years old. Amazing. He's competing at a breakdancing competition in Philadelphia, and he may not have won, but I tell you what, he is winning over a lot of people on the internet. Yes. He really is. Yeah, he's winning over a lot of people on the internet.
This guy wouldn't pay my medical bills.
That is not true. More on that in a minute.
I just want to jump in here real fast because there's something really sweet. If you look at both of them, what's going on here? She's laughing, and if she's really traumatized by this, which she claims, she seems to truly enjoy seeing her father dancing like this. And he's got the biggest smile on his face, doesn't he? Reacting to this, and he's just jumping and saying, "That's not true. I didn't really abandon them. And of course, I paid her medical bills." It's what is this all about then? Is this really just about anybody can go viral on the internet if you just tell the most outlandish story and it doesn't matter how true it is? Actually, I think that's exactly what this is about. Let's watch a little further.
The worst part, damn it, he's good. He should not be able to move his body like that. It's like impossible. It's beautiful. Hey, Dad.
Thank you, Maddie.
Like there was no split custody or anything. Like he just like left 4 kids to do that. He may not have paid for some of my medical bills growing up, but he did give me this breakdancing merchandise. So that's him. He's on his
That is a nice shirt.
This is his b-boy name because his name is Ben Hart. You know, I'll get texts like this, "Happy birthday?" ? And then like links to his breakdancing video.
That's true.
If you have funny trauma, like actual funny haha trauma, I need to hear it. Thank you.
Okay, in many ways, I love this video. And of course, I love my daughter, Maddie. And we get along great. At least I think we do. But a few corrections are in order, or at least a few things that need to be put in context.
Okay, just we're gonna let him go here. We are. I do like that. I love you, Maddie. Thanks, Maddie. It's very cute. Brother's wearing a Bitcoin shirt, right? That if he got customized Bitcoin swag, I got so many questions for this dude. Also, the background. I mean, we're pretty happy about our new set here. Have we even mentioned? We got a lot going on here with our new set. But our man here, our little hip hop guy, is looking a little like a hoarder. I think you got to find a better background if you're going to do a video like this. Just spruce it up a little bit. All right, let's watch him.
First, I can see that as a 5-year-old, Maddie would see her dad as having abandoned the family. One day I was living there, the next day I wasn't. And that will look like abandonment to a child. But married couples do get divorced about half the time in America. And I was just living a mile or so down the street in LaGrange, Illinois. We just weren't living under the same roof. Now, about not paying medical bills, that's just not correct. Here was the financial arrangement of the divorce. Maddie's mom, my ex-wife, got $2 million at the get-go, out of the gate, a lump sum payment. Plus, I was paying her $18,000 per month in child support and alimony.
Whoa. Hold on. What? I thought we were dealing with some sort of like, lower middle class kind of Jerry Springer sort of feud going on here. Dude gave a $2 million settlement right at the get-go plus 18 grand a month. That's as a victim of divorce in America myself, I can tell you, and as a challenged yet diligent divorced father, I can tell you that is an astronomical amount of monthly support. So this is insane. What did mom do with all that money? Okay, now I really need to know what's going on here.
This was later reduced to $12,000 per month. And of course, I paid health insurance and out-of-pocket medical costs. I also put $600,000 into the kids' college fund. In all, I paid out about $5 million to my ex-wife to cover costs for her and the kids. And this is in 2005 dollars. So add 50% to account for inflation. In other words, I was not a deadbeat dad at all. And by the way, Maddie did not say that in her video, but a lot of the comments assume that and say that. Now, of course, there was no way for Maddie to know how much I was paying because she was a kid. This wasn't something I talked about. Also, remember that I was living 1 mile down the road from the kids in LaGrange, Illinois. Sidewalks all the way. An easy walk or bike ride. I saw the kids all the time. No abandonment, just a divorce. Was I at fault in the divorce? Yeah, I would say I was about 70% at fault. I own that. Maddie's mom and I were really not compatible in many ways. We were compatible in some ways, but not in other ways. Do I regret marrying Maddie's mom? No, absolutely not. If I had not married Maddie's mom, Maddie and her 3 siblings would not have been born. They would not have existed. The kids have turned out great. Maddie graduated from Northwestern University and is a screenwriter in Hollywood. Maddie's older sister, Tori, is a partner at a hedge fund on Wall Street, and she's getting rich. Maddie's younger sister, Olivia, just graduated from college and is teaching English to first graders in Thailand. Her older brother, Peter, is getting a master's degree in psychology. I get along great with all my kids, including Maddie. At least I think I do. So the kids are doing just fine despite Dad's many shortcomings. One other slight correction. which I hesitate to even bring up because I love the way Maddie did this in her video. I did not abandon the family for breakdancing. I have a career. I'm in the advertising business, built an ad agency. That's how I was able to afford to pay Maddie's mom $5 million.
All right. So I guess that all makes sense. And by the way, hopefully Maddie, college educated and now Hollywood screenwriter Maddie, can maybe do a follow-up video here apologizing for misrepresenting this about her dad, unless she's testing out a new concept for a streaming show or a Hollywood film script that she wants to write. That might make sense because it sounds like there's quite a bit of embellishment and fiction here. And she should apologize to her dad too. I mean, he paid out big time for her, and that's hardly abandonment. It's hard being a divorced parent, and to see something like this has got to hurt this guy's feelings. I thought that he handled it pretty well. And one thing though, honestly, dude, I get it. You want to set the record straight, and I do have a lot of questions about the Bitcoin shirt. And it is just fine that you had irreconcilable differences, and you are an advertising executive, and you just wanted to live a new life and be an executive. But honestly, I think the idea that you left so you could pursue your career as a breakdancer at the age of 60 is a much better story. I think Maddie's got it on this one. I think you should own it. I think you should take it. Take it and run with it. I mean, she's already set it up for you. She's defined it. She's created it. I mean, if you had the choice between your legend, your legacy, being that at middle age, you decided to go and pursue your life as a divorced father of 4 advertising executive, or as a professional breakdancer, it's a no-brainer. Trust me, that didn't need to be corrected. Stick with it. Own it. You're my hero. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and thanks for, we'd love your comments on our new set. It's a work in progress. There'll be some additions to it, but we are sprucing up and adding to the program every single day to support your great support of us. And to that end, I want to remind you, you can watch us every day at noon live on Rumble. Leave your comments, share the video as much as you can, and then check it out. If you missed any of it, you can check the clips as well. Also, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all those other places, as well as on YouTube, and see us, of course, on all the great content that we do at all of the Town Hall sites. That's townhall.com, Hot Air, PJ Media, Red State, Twitchy, and Bearing Arms. That's it for today. My name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.